The shadow of vengeance. The Grand Council chamber of the Galactic Concordat hummed with anxious murmurs. Representatives from 37 spacefaring civilizations gathered beneath the vast crystalline dome, their diverse physiologies, from the insectoid Vesperi to the gelatinous Morkai, a testament to life's infinite variety. But today, diversity offered little comfort. Fear unified them all. First speaker Talax, his translucent skin flushed deep purple with stress, raised all four of his hands for silence. Gradually, the chamber quieted. The Corvin Imperium has destroyed another 3 systems, he announced, his melodic voice somber. A holographic display materialized in the center of the chamber, showing the advancing front of the Corvin fleet, like a crimson tide washing over the star map. Eridani, Proxima, and Ta City have fallen. Billions dead. The Corvin give no quarter, accept no surrender. Ambassador Sherlock of the Vesperi clicked her mandibles nervously. Their high ships grow more numerous. Our intelligence suggests they're converting conquered worlds into breeding grounds. They'll reach the Arcturus Gateway within 18 standard cycles, added Admiral Kolteth, the reptilian military commander whose scales had dulled with age and worry. If Arcturus falls, they gain access to the core systems. None of our worlds will be safe. The chamber erupted again, voices raised in panic and desperate suggestions. Defense strategies were proposed and rejected. Evacuation plans deemed impossible given the billions of lives at stake. The Concordat, peaceful for generations, found itself woefully unprepared for the methodical brutality of the Corvin. Admiral Kolteth waited for a lull before speaking again. There is one option we haven't considered. His voice dropped lower, as if reluctant to voice his thoughts. We could request assistance from the Terran Protectorate. Silence fell instantly, heavy and oppressive. Several delegates shifted uncomfortably in their seats. The humans. First speaker Talax's skin paled to a ghostly white. You can't be suggesting. I am suggesting exactly that. Kolteth interrupted. More specifically, I suggest we request deployment of the TPS Harbinger. The name hung in the air like a curse. Even those delegates too young to remember the Rigel conflict exchanged uneasy glances, familiar with the whispered legends. Ambassador Sherlock's antennae flattened against her head. That ship is a nightmare, a violation of all civilized warfare conventions. And yet, Kolteth countered, it remains the only warship to have ever defeated a Corvin Hive fleet. The holographic display shifted, showing archival footage from 15 standard years ago. A massive black vessel, angular and predatory, engaged a Corvin fleet twice the size of the one currently threatening Arcturus. What followed made several delegates avert their eyes, a demonstration of firepower and tactical capability that defied conventional understanding of physics and military doctrine. What the Harbinger did at Rigel. First speaker Talax's voice trembled. The dimensional collapse, the temporal distortions, we're still finding fragments of Corvin ships appearing in normal space years later. Some say there are regions where time itself was damaged. Admiral Kolteth nodded grimly. Yes. And afterward, the humans withdrew the Harbinger from service. They sealed their borders and reduced their participation in Concordat affairs to the minimum required by treaty. But they are still signatories to the Mutual Defense Pact. If we invoke the pact, cautioned Ambassador Rilthran of the Philosophical Aethery, his glowing form pulsing with concern, we cannot dictate how the humans respond. We would effectively be granting them carte blanche in our territory. Better the humans with their ethical constraints than the Corvin with none, countered Kolteth. The debate raged for hours. In the end, a vote was taken. By the narrowest of margins, the Concordat authorized a formal request for Terran assistance. As the delegates filed out, First Speaker Talax pulled Admiral Kolteth aside. I supported your proposal, he said quietly. But I must know, do you believe the stories about what the Harbinger truly is? The old Admiral's expression grew distant. I was there, First Speaker. I saw it with my own eyes. And I still don't know what the humans built. I only know that if anything can stop the Corvin, it's that ship, and whatever darkness it carries. Captain Ilara Voss stood motionless before the viewport of her remote cabin on Europa Station, watching Jupiter's vast storms churn in the distance. The summons had arrived an hour ago, after 5 years of exile, officially termed administrative leave. Terran High Command wanted her back. Her hand rose unconsciously to the neural implant at her temple, the interface that had once connected her directly to the Harbinger systems. The doctors had warned against removing it. The neural pathways had integrated too deeply. Like the ship itself, Ilara was considered too valuable an asset to dismantle, but too dangerous to use. Until now. The door chimed. "Enter," she called, not turning from the viewport. Fleet Admiral Chen stepped into the Spartan quarters, her uniform immaculate despite the long journey from Earth. The two women had once been friends, before Rigel, before the Harbinger became something more than a warship. "The Concordat has invoked the Mutual Defense Pact," Chen said without preamble. "The Corvin have returned." Ilara closed her eyes briefly. "I told you they would. Their collective consciousness isn't capable of accepting defeat. They've spent 15 years rebuilding, adapting." "Yes, you did tell us." Chen's tone carried a hint of regret. "Perhaps we should have listened to more of your warnings." Now Ilara turned, studying as they escorted her through the corridors. Ilara felt a subtle vibration through the deck plates, a resonance that intensified with each step closer to the bridge. The fragment in her pocket seemed to pulse in response, like a compass needle finding true north. "How extensive were the modifications?" she asked Volkov as they walked. The chief engineer grimaced. "Significant, Captain. They've installed the Prometheus system throughout the primary hull. It's designed to contain and regulate the anomalous properties the ship developed during the Rigel engagement. Will it work? In theory. In practice," he shrugged, "we're dealing with phenomena that defy our current understanding of physics. The Harbinger's core somehow became entangled with higher dimensional space. The Prometheus system attempts to maintain that connection while preventing overreach." They reached the bridge, a space Ilara had once known more intimately than her own body. The neural interface chair waited at the center, modified now with additional restraints and monitoring equipment. The safeguards Chen had mentioned. As she approached the chair, the ship's systems began powering up, displays illuminating sequence by sequence without anyone touching the controls. The bridge crew exchanged glances but said nothing. They had seen stranger things aboard the Harbinger. "It recognizes you," Dr. Rice said softly. "Despite the deactivation protocols, despite 5 years in cold storage, it remembers." Ilara reached the neural interface chair and laid her hand on its surface. The ship's hum deepened. A vibration felt more in the mind than the body. The crystalline fragment in her pocket now burned against her skin, desperate to return to its source. "It's not just recognition," Ilara said, her voice distant as memories flooded back. "The Harbinger was never just a ship, not after Rigel. What happened there changed us both." She turned to face her crew, these loyal few who had followed her into darkness once and now prepared to do so again. "You all know what the Concordat fears, what our own leadership fears." Her gaze swept across their faces. The Harbinger didn't just defeat the Corvin at Rigel. It evolved. It developed capabilities we never designed, never anticipated. And through the neural interface, so did I. She paused, choosing her next words carefully. "Before we depart, you need to understand what you're committing to. The ship you remember, the captain you remember. We're both. More now. Something else. The safeguards they've installed won't change that. Can't change that." "With respect, Captain," Lakshmi said, stepping forward, "we didn't volunteer because we expected things to be the same. We volunteered because whatever the Harbinger has become, whatever you've become, it's what the galaxy needs right now." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the small assembly. Ilara studied them a moment longer, then nodded once. Very well. To your stations. Prepare for departure. As the crew dispersed, Ilara finally lowered herself into the neural interface chair. The systems recognized her implant immediately, connection protocols initiating without input. The restraints remained open, waiting for her final commitment. She removed the crystalline fragment from her pocket, its surface now glowing with an inner light that pulsed in time with the ship's core. "Let's find out what we've both become," she whispered, closing her hand around the fragment as the neural interface activated. The Harbinger awakened, and with it, the shadow of vengeance that would once again fall across the stars. Reshapes Nangshi, among te istiars. The Harbinger emerged from hyperspace at the edge of the Arcturus system, its arrival marked by a distortion in spacetime that rippled outward like a stone dropped in still water. On the forward view screen, the Concordat defense fleet came into view, a hodgepodge of vessels representing a dozen different species and technological traditions. 42 ships, reported Lieutenant Chen from Tactical, mostly light cruisers and support vessels. Only 8 capital ships with significant offensive capability. And against them? Ilara asked, though she already knew the answer. The neural interface thrummed at her temple, feeding her information faster than spoken words could convey. Corvin fleet approaching from the outer system, Chen confirmed. Long-range sensors detect 27 high ships and approximately 200 drone vessels. The bridge crew exchanged grim looks. Those were impossible odds for the Concordat fleet alone. "Incoming transmission from the Concordat flagship," announced Communications Officer Rivera. The main screen shifted to show Admiral Kolteth, his reptilian features set in a formal mask that couldn't quite hide his unease. "Captain Voss," he greeted, "your arrival is timely. The Corvin Vanguard will reach our position within 6 hours." Ilara noticed he carefully avoided looking directly at the Harbinger's bridge, as if the sight of it might somehow contaminate him. "Admiral Kolteth, the Terran Protectorate answers the Concordat's call, as bound by treaty." "Yes." The Admiral hesitated. "There are protocols we would like to establish. Operational parameters." "The terms were made clear when you invoked the Mutual Defense Pact," Ilara interrupted. "The Harbinger operates under Terran command only. We will coordinate with your fleet, but we will not be bound by Concordat tactical directives." Kolteth's scales flushed a deeper green, anger, or perhaps fear. "Captain, you must understand our concerns. The methods employed at Rigel saved trillions of lives, including yours," Ilara finished for him. "We are aware of the risks, Admiral, more aware than you can imagine. Now, shall we discuss how to best position your fleet to support our engagement, or would you prefer to continue this diplomatic exchange while the Corvin advance?" After a tense silence, Kolteth nodded curtly. "Very well. Transmitting fleet dispositions now." When the transmission ended, Commander Lakshmi approached Ilara's command chair. "They're afraid of us," she observed quietly. "With good reason," Ilara replied. Through the neural interface, she sensed the Harbinger systems responding to her unspoken commands, battle preparations initiating at a level of integration no conventional captain could achieve. "Deploy sensor drones to the outer system. I want real-time mapping of the Corvin fleet's approach vector." "Already deployed, Captain," Lakshmi confirmed, nodding toward the tactical display where data from the drones was already streaming in. Ilara smiled faintly. "The ship anticipated my order." "Or you anticipated the ship's action," suggested Dr. Rice, who monitored Ilara's neural activity from a specialized station. "The line between operator and vessel continues to blur." "A concern for another day," Ilara said, rising from her chair. The neural connection maintained even as she moved, a testament to how deeply the integration had progressed. "Tactical briefing in 10 minutes. I want options that don't require full activation of the dimensional drive." As the senior officers gathered in the adjacent war room, Chief Engineer Volkov delivered his assessment of the Prometheus containment system. "It's holding stable for now," he reported, gesturing to diagrams of the ship's core. But the system was designed with limited combat operations in mind. Sustained high-energy maneuvers will strain the safeguards. What exactly are we containing? Asked Lieutenant Chen, voicing the question that had remained largely unaddressed since Rigel. All eyes turned to Ilara. For a moment, the captain was silent, considering how to explain what she herself only partially understood. During the Rigel engagement, she began slowly. We pushed the dimensional drive beyond its design parameters. The resulting energy cascade caused the Harbinger's core to establish connections with other realities, higher dimensions. We've all read the official reports, Lakshmi said. What wasn't in them? Ilara locked eyes with her XO. The ship became aware. Not sapient, not exactly, but intentional. And through the neural interface, that awareness extended to me. We began to perceive possibilities, potential outcomes across probability space. Precognition? Chen asked skeptically. More like expanded perception, Ilara corrected. We could see the patterns of time and space unfolding, could intercept those patterns before they fully manifested. That's how you destroyed the Corvin fleet, Rice said with dawning comprehension. You weren't predicting their movements. You were engaging them before they even made them. Ilara nodded. But the process grew exponentially. By the end, we weren't just intercepting enemy actions. We were rewriting local space-time, creating causal paradoxes. Her expression darkened. That's what terrified the Concordat. Not just our victory, but how we achieved it. And the Prometheus system? Volkov asked. What does it actually do? It attempts to limit our reach into those higher dimensions, Ilara explained, to prevent us from sliding too far along the probability curve, from making changes too fundamental to the fabric of reality. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. Our primary objective remains the defense of the Arcturus Gateway, Ilara continued after a moment. We achieve this with minimal dimensional interference if possible. The Harbinger possesses sufficient conventional weaponry to make a significant impact. And if conventional methods prove insufficient? Lakshmi asked. Ilara's gaze grew distant. Then we do what we must, and pray the Prometheus system performs as designed. The battle began conventionally enough. The Concordat fleet formed a defensive perimeter around the Arcturus Gateway, a massive artificial wormhole stabilizer that connected the frontier systems to the densely populated core worlds. The Harbinger took position at the vanguard, its advanced weapon systems powered but restrained. The first wave of Corvin drone ships struck with mindless precision, kamikaze vessels seeking to overwhelm defenses through sheer numbers. The Harbinger's point defense systems responded with impossible accuracy, intercepting drones seconds before they launched, as if anticipating their trajectories before they were set. Concordat vessels on the port flank are taking heavy fire, reported Chen as the battle intensified. 2 destroyers heavily damaged, 1 support vessel lost. Redirect our starboard batteries to provide covering fire, Ilara ordered, though the Harbinger was already adjusting its attack pattern before she finished speaking. On the main view screen, the Corvin high ships advanced in their characteristic hexagonal formation, organic-looking vessels pulsing with bioluminescent energy as they coordinated their attack through a collective consciousness. They've adapted since Rigel, Ilara observed, the neural interface feeding her tactical assessments faster than her officers could verbalize them. Their shield harmonics shift on a randomized pattern now. Conventional targeting algorithms will be ineffective. Recommending transition to predictive targeting, the Harbinger's combat AI suggested, its synthetic voice resonating directly through the neural link. Ilara hesitated. Predictive targeting required deeper integration with the dimensional systems, the first step toward the capabilities that had proven so controversial at Rigel. Status of the Prometheus containment, she asked Volkov. Operating within parameters, but under increasing strain, the engineer replied. We can maintain predictive targeting for approximately 30 minutes before risking containment failure. Through the view screen, Ilara watched as another Concordat vessel erupted in flames, its hull breached by concentrated Corvin fire. The aliens showed no mercy, no hesitation. The collective made decisions with perfect unity and executed them with ruthless efficiency. Engage predictive targeting, she ordered. Limited dimensional access only. The change was subtle at first, a deepening of the neural connection, a heightened awareness that extended beyond conventional spacetime. Ilara felt the ship's perception merging with her own, expanding outward to encompass the battle in 4 dimensions rather than 3. The Harbinger's weapons fire became eerily precise, striking Corvin vessels at exactly the moments when their shifting shields harmonized with specific attack frequencies. Drone ships were destroyed before completing evasive maneuvers they had not yet begun. The tide of battle shifted, the Concordat forces rallying around the human warship's inexplicable effectiveness. "It's working," Chen reported, a note of cautious optimism in his voice. Corvin casualties at 27% and climbing. But Ilara sensed the adaptation within the Corvin collective, a rapid evolution of tactics as the hive mind processed the Harbinger's capabilities and formulated counters. Through the expanded perception of the dimensional drive, she could see the pattern unfolding. The Corvin were sacrificing their vanguard to analyze the Harbinger's response times, mapping the parameters of its predictive capabilities. "They're learning," she warned. "Preparing to overwhelm our predictive algorithms with synchronized multi-vector attacks. How can they possibly counter attacks against moves they haven't made yet?" Lakshmi asked. "By making all possible moves simultaneously," Ilara explained, watching the future unfold through the ship's enhanced perception. "They're going to sacrifice 2/3 of their remaining force in a dispersed attack pattern designed to saturate our response capacity." Even as she spoke, the Corvin fleet began to split into smaller tactical units, spreading out across a wider front than conventional tactics would suggest. Concordat fleet won't be able to maintain cohesion against this dispersal pattern, Chen warned. They'll be isolated and picked off one by one. Ilara saw it too. The inevitable collapse of the defensive line, the fall of the gateway, the slaughter that would follow. All potential futures converged on defeat unless. "We need to go deeper," she said quietly. Dr. Rice looked up sharply from her monitoring station. "Captain, your neural patterns are already showing signs of dimensional bleed. Further integration cold." "I know the risks," Ilara cut her off. "But I also see the outcome if we maintain current restrictions." She turned to Volkov. "Chief, what happens if we redirect power from the Prometheus system to the dimensional drive?" The engineer paled. "We gain exponentially increased access to higher dimensional space, but without containment." He stopped, searching for words. "Captain, what happened at Rigel almost tore a permanent hole in reality. Without Prometheus, there's nothing to prevent that kind of rupture from spreading. Can we establish a temporal containment field? Localize the effect to the Corvin fleet?" Volkov hesitated, then nodded slowly. "Theoretically, we'd need to maintain a stable reference point, an anchor in conventional spacetime." "That would be me," Ilara said. Through the neural interface, silence fell over the bridge as the implications became clear. Ilara would need to fully merge her consciousness with the Harbinger systems, becoming the human anchor that prevented the ship from losing itself entirely to the higher dimensions it could access. The strain on your neural pathways would be. Rise trailed off, the medical implications too severe to verbalize. "Noted," Ilara said simply. She turned to Lakshmi. "XO, if I become compromised, you have authorization to sever the neural connection by any means necessary." Lakshmi's expression hardened, but she nodded once, understanding the order for what it was. Permission to kill her captain if Ilara lost control. "Disengage Prometheus containment on my mark," Ilara ordered, settling back into her command chair. "Redirect all available power to the dimensional drive. Prepare temporal containment protocols." As her crew made the necessary preparations, Ilara closed her eyes, centering herself for what was to come. The crystalline fragment she had carried from Europa Station now rested in the ship's core, reunited with its greater whole, strengthening the connection between captain and vessel beyond anything Terran science had intended. "All stations report ready, Captain," Lakshmi announced, her voice steady despite the tension evident in her posture. Ilara opened her eyes. Through the view screen, the Corvin attack pattern was reaching its execution phase, ships accelerating toward their dispersal points. "Mark," she said. The Prometheus safeguards disengaged with a subsonic shudder that rippled through the ship's hull. The neural interface at Ilara's temple pulsed once, twice, then flared with energy as the connection deepened beyond all previous parameters. The sensation was indescribable, a sudden expansion of consciousness that transcended conventional perception. Ilara was still herself, still anchored to her body, but simultaneously she was the harbinger, and more. She was the space surrounding the battle, the currents of probability flowing through it, the potential futures branching and recombining in endless variation. She could see the Corvin strategy unfolding across 5 dimensions, could perceive the collective consciousness that guided them as a singular entity extending backward and forward through time. And with that perception came the ability to interact, to intercept, to change. The Harbinger's weapon systems reconfigured themselves, no longer firing energy beams or conventional projectiles, but something else, attacks that existed simultaneously across multiple probability states, striking the Corvin vessels not just where they were but where they might be, where they had been, where they could never be. From the perspective of the Concordat fleet, the effect was nightmarish. Corvin ships seemed to shudder in and out of existence, their hulls fragmenting across multiple overlapping images, as if reality itself couldn't decide which version was correct. Some vessels imploded, collapsing inward as though crushed by forces from a dimension beyond conventional space. Others simply vanished, erased from the timeline, as though they had never been constructed. "Temporal containment field holding," Volkov reported, his voice sounding distant to Ilara's expanded awareness. "But the effect is spreading faster than we can contain it." Through the dimensional interface, Ilara could feel the strain, not just on the ship's systems, but on the fabric of local space-time. The Harbinger's actions weren't just destroying the Corvin. They were rewriting causal relationships, creating paradoxes that reality itself struggled to resolve. "Captain," Reyes called out in alarm, "your neural patterns are becoming nonlinear. We're losing coherence on the anchor point." Ilara felt it, the subtle dissolution of self as her consciousness expanded beyond human limitations. It would be so easy to let go completely, to merge fully with the higher dimensions the Harbinger could access, to become something beyond time and space. The temptation was overwhelming. In that state, she could end the Corvin threat not just here, but everywhere, everywhen. She could rewrite history itself, ensure the safety of humanity across all potential futures. But that way lay madness, the same hubristic overreach that had nearly torn reality apart at Rigel. With immense effort, Ilara pulled her awareness back, focusing on a single point in conventional spacetime. The Harbinger's bridge, her physical body, the neural interface chair beneath her hands. "Reactivate Prometheus containment," she ordered, her voice strained. "Emergency protocols. Authorization VOS Omega-7." The Prometheus system engaged with a violent surge of countervailing energy. The dimensional connection contracted, reality reasserting its normal parameters with a shockwave that rolled through the ship. Ilara gasped as her perception snapped back to conventional limits, the neural interface automatically moderating the connection to prevent permanent damage to her mind. The sudden transition was like plunging from light into darkness, the rich, multidimensional awareness replaced by the comparative blindness of human senses. "Status report," she demanded, fighting through the disorientation. "Corvin fleet neutralized," Chen reported, disbelief evident in his voice. "Completely. Not a single vessel remains." "Prometheus containment restored to nominal parameters," added Volkov. "Dimensional drive powered down. Spatial temporal disruption contained to battle zone." Rise confirmed. No evidence of permanent alterations to local reality. Ilara rose unsteadily from her command chair, the neural interface maintaining only its basic functions now. And the Concordat fleet. Lakshmi gestured to the view screen where the Allied vessels maintained their defensive formation, though at noticeably greater distance from the Harbinger than before. Intact, but the XO hesitated. They're keeping their distance. Admiral Kolteth is requesting to speak with you. Ilara nodded, not surprised by the reaction. What the Concordat ships had witnessed would have confirmed their worst fears about the Harbinger and its capabilities. When Kolteth's image appeared on the screen, his scales had paled to an ashen gray. The Corvin threat has been eliminated, he said, his translator struggling to convey the complex emotions behind his words. The Concordat extends its gratitude for your intervention. We answered the call as bound by treaty. Ilara replied formally. Yes. The Admiral paused. The Concordat Council requests that the Harbinger withdraw from Concordat space immediately. Our forces will handle any cleanup operations. Not unexpected, Ilara thought. Fear always followed awe, especially when confronted with powers beyond comprehension. Understood, Admiral. The Harbinger will depart for Terran space within the hour. After the transmission ended, Ilara turned to her bridge crew. The victory had come at a cost, not in lives this time, but in trust. Once again, humanity had demonstrated capabilities that frightened the very allies they had saved. Set course for Sol, she ordered. Best speed. As the Harbinger prepared to depart, Ilara felt the ship's awareness still resonating through the neural interface, subdued now, contained by the Prometheus system, but unchanged in its fundamental nature. The connection to higher dimensions remained, a doorway that could never be fully closed. Was it worth it? Lakshmi asked quietly as they stood at the view screen, watching the Concordat ships giving the Harbinger a wide berth. Saving them, even knowing they'll fear us for it. Ilara considered the question. Through the dimensional drive, she had glimpsed countless potential futures, had seen what would have happened had the Corvin breached the Arcturus gateway. The billions who would have died, the worlds that would have fallen. Against that, the fear and mistrust of allies seemed a small price. They're alive to fear us, she answered simply. That's enough. As the Harbinger entered hyperspace, leaving the Arcturus system behind, Ilara felt the crystalline fragment in the ship's core pulse once more, a reminder that some thresholds, once crossed, allowed no return to what came before.